Try one more time.
Testing. Testing the microphone.
We're all good. We're about ready when you are, Hojo.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We crank up the electronic notebook here. What would Dogen have done with a laptop? Say it again? Yeah, the three bells to start the Dharma dialogue. And everybody please join in. The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. So good morning. This is fourth Sunday in Atlanta. I assume it is where you are. And we do what we bill as a contemporary talk, with the proviso that, as Matsuoka Roshi said, Zen is always contemporary. Wanted to do something a little different today, kind of a reverse Dharma combat. So I will ask the questions and expect you to come up with some answers. So it might be useful if you have a notebook, you have a way of keeping the notes on your laptop or your whatever mobile device you're using. I want to read briefly from an upcoming podcast. Those of you who are following the podcast, seeing that I've launched into a little different approach there as well. And it's based on what I find as the connections between parallels between design, problem solving, problem definition, problem solving in design profession, which was my professional career, and those encountered in Zen. Of course, most of us, I think of Zen problems as essentially koans, the kind of Rinzai Zen practice, which is very, very formalized. And to a degree, that's, I think that's legitimate, but the broader spectrum or the broader perspective on this is that essentially everything is a koan. Everything we run into, everything we face in life is an aspect, differing degrees of relevance and importance of the problem of everyday life, or the koan of everyday life. Genjo koan, the fundamental point. What is the fundamental point? So in this particular series, I had been talking about process and method, things like that. Process in Zen, process in design. Both of them have kind of equal emphasis on process. And wanted to just make one more note here, which brings us into sort of the present moment, which is kind of where I want to focus our attention today. We typically are not topical. We typically do not have a sermon commenting on the moral play, drama, melodrama that we see going on in the world around us. But there are times when it's compelling enough that I think it starts to illustrate certain principles of Buddhism that we need to be cognizant of and address. So in this one, this is going on further into these pairs of things which seem to have relevance both in Zen and design, and probably in your daily life in terms of problem solving. And that's the whole kind of the point of this series is if these can be brought down to practical things that we can apply, they become sort of both Zen and design, or the design of Zen, or the Zen of design, something like that. So the first paragraph I just want to read. I'm not going to go into detail here, but these run for about 3 pages, or about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes each. So if you want to follow them, you can listen to one in a brief period of time, or you can listen to a series of 3 or 4 that are sometimes connected, so you can engage the long form by listening for an hour or so to a series of them. So each one begins with a brief haiku poem, trying to sort of capture where this is going. And the pair here that I'm working with are discovery and invention. So the brief poem is called Discovery. And it says, discovery now, invention follows later in the life of Zen. So placing discovery first, invention following. One more general point about process may be worth noting before considering the processes of discovery and invention. Like most words, processing can be used as a euphemism. The last message on the evening news was that this night was going to be the worst of the current invasion of Ukraine by the Russian military. Turning on the news this morning, the first station was talking about sports. The second about methane emissions from raising cattle. I did not dwell for long on the sports commentary, just experienced a frisson of familiar disorientation that comes with the sense of living in 2 different worlds. Imagining rockets and mortars dropping in my cozy neighborhood in Atlanta, while somewhere on the other side of the world, local attention is rapidly focused on today's soccer game. The methane discussion, while at least focused on a real problem, that of global warming, was not that much more rational. It hinged around the idea of raising so many million head of grass-fed versus grain-fed cattle in order to reduce the amount of methane in cow burps. The additional cost associated with the former, according to the rancher and self-proclaimed scientist being interviewed, that is the grass-fed, the difference in cost, does not result from the manner of feeding, but that of, quote, processing the cattle. The fact that factory farming allows for geographically compact organization of feedlots close to processing plants, the slaughterhouse in more honest words, is the sum total of the problem definition, at least from the perspective of the interest committing to producing a grass-fed product to meet the demand of the market for beef. His proposed solution is to invest in building processing plants close to the pastures. The rest of the dialogue was all about adding things like oregano and kelp to the diet of the cattle as serious proposals to solve the problem. By this time, a similar sense of losing my bearings with the focus on sports made me slightly dizzy. That these, quote, products to be, quote, processed are living beings was not mentioned, nor the processing called out for what it actually is. Needless to say, any suggestion around reducing the consumption of beef, an obvious solution to the problem, crossed no one's lips. This may be taken as yet another lively example of the tragedy of the commons, so common to our times, but from a deadly bovine perspective. Bossy is not likely to ever die of natural causes, whatever the method of feeding. Shout out to Big Mac. So then I pick up on the thread of design thinking in Zen. What I'd like to do today is just raise a question. I'm going to phrase this very carefully, and then I want to deconstruct the question a little bit, but I want you to start writing down your comments and questions so that when we go to the Q&A, which Tsuki will facilitate, you'll be ready to go and we can hear from everybody today. One of the problems I have with our online format, not this one in particular, but all of the ones I participate in, which are several a month, maybe half a dozen a month, is that they do not allow much time for dialogue. And with the group out of Korea, they limit all responses to 5 minutes and directed to the facilitator and so forth. They have sort of like 4 or 5 etiquette, user-friendly rules that everybody agrees to. And occasionally they have a whole meeting, and they run for 90 minutes to 2 hours. They have a whole meeting that is dedicated to nothing but answering questions from the audience, from the prior discussion that we had where there wasn't time. So those are some of the recommendations I could make to our format. And I think especially when we have a guest teacher like Stephen Hine a few weeks ago, we probably want to be more polite on our end by allowing it to run as long as he's willing to talk, or as long as he wants it to run, or she, our guest teacher. I think that's especially true if we have somebody like Ashok Rinpoche from the Dalai Lama's circle, and people like that. You're never going to hear from them again in person in your life. And so when we have a guest speaker on, I'm lobbying for the idea that we sort of loosen the strictures and let that person just go on. When I'm a guest teacher for you, Ungan in Jacksonville, or somebody else out there, I'm not looking for that. I'm fine with the formats we have. But when we have a special guest, I think we want to make some accommodation. So here's the question. What the hell is wrong with Vladimir Putin? And the what here is the Zen question, as I point out in Razor Blade of Zen. The why questions are theistic, religious kinds of philosophical questions. The how questions are scientific, rationalist kinds of method questions, practical questions. But Zen has the what question, typified by what is it that thus comes, Huineng's question to his, upon first meeting the monk who later became his successor. What is it that thus comes? So what, the hell, and hell here is also in the Buddhist sense, is self-made here on earth as is heaven. The famous story of the Zen master visited by a samurai with an audience. And the samurai asks something about heaven and hell. And the Zen master responds with a very snide kind of remark that even if I could explain that to you, he didn't say a dunce like you, but he said, a person like you, what would you do with it? So this was very insulting to this samurai. And the story goes, his face turns red and he gets up and starts to pull his sword. And the Zen master says, "This is hell." So the samurai realizes he's been had here, and he sort of, puts the sword back and sits down. And the Zen master says, "This is heaven." So I wouldn't take a chance like that in trying to make a simple point, but some of the ancients were not so shy. So what the hell is wrong? There's another good 5-letter word for it. What's wrong, as opposed to right? What's wrong with Vladimir Putin? And by extension, just fill in the blank, take Vladimir Putin out and put in there whoever you want, or whatever you want. What the hell is wrong with the United States? Or any POTUS that you choose to pick. But I think it would be a good idea to start with Putin and he's kind of replaced Trump as the, what would you call it, the madman of the day, or the focus of our attention every day. Waking up and wondering what's going on. What next thing has been done. Nowadays, it's you wake up and wonder what's Putin done next, or how far has the incursion gone. Fortunately, from the perspective of Ukraine, it's been 4 days now and they haven't been able to capture Kiev. And one of the ironies that I think is really should be emblazoned somewhere in concrete or stone or something. Russia is said to be the supplier of 40%, something like that, of the European Union's gas and oil. And the new pipeline has been stopped and all those aspects of it. And the reason they're hesitating to sanction gas and oil is that reason, because then Europe will be hurting for 40% of their energy resource as fossil fuels. But the irony is the tanks are running out of gas. I mean, you can't make this up. There's nothing funny about this situation. The humor is like that, you know. They say drowning in a swimming pool is not funny. Unless you happen to be on a cruise yacht in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, then it's pretty funny, right? So with that, maybe you had time to make some notes. We'll turn it over to Suki. Suki, let's not forget the inner crowd here.
Oh,
Good to see your smiling faces. The usual hands up will do, catch Suki's attention.
and I'll keep an eye on the room right now. We're being poured tea. On Zoom, any immediate hands arise?
Joseph?
Yeah, I would say something, but don't let me get carried away. To your point, I think there are good reasons why there are very formal processes around open debate, because it can get unwieldy and you're just all over the place. I did take down some notes, but the most direct thing, what's wrong with Putin? It's funny. I also wrote a tiny haiku on the eve of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so I'll read it. It's like this: vast serpent encircling the celestial axis, a dragon in the night, which I guess is about the constellation Draco and the way it wraps around the celestial axis, and maybe the way the hindbrain wraps around the cerebellum. I don't know much about the brain, but like I know there is a part of your biology, it's called the limbic system, and it's responsible for the base palette of emotional impulses, so disgust and anger and fear and hatred, but also joy and interest. And so how do we purify it of the more ignoble impulses? Would be like a naive way to frame, a certain spiritual problem, but like it's hard. Like, how do you clean a polluted stream? You can do it over time, not by a bunch of rash actions, which like multiply complexities, but by maybe subtracting yourself. And so this was try to connect it back to Zen was my thought. And it's sometimes dismissed as quietism because you're just sitting, but I'd suggest it's intended to activate your compassion for sentient beings, and that all the joy and bliss that's said to come from it comes from, at the very least, the compassion for yourself and all the forgiveness, maybe just recognizing the way Buddha absorbs all the suffering of sentient beings, and so that's a very beautiful reality. Yeah.
Putin does not meditate?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll just say, like, it doesn't matter what's wrong with him. It's like, it's obvious. He's a monstrous oppressor, both of his own people and of the former Soviet republics. He wants to reconstitute the fallen glory of a once great nation whose character it basically can't stay in it.
What would make him want to do that?
Why would he want to do this? I mean, I don't.
What would make Putin want to? One of the commentators said he sees himself as the heir to Peter the Great and so forth. But what, from a more personal or sort of Zen-based dharmic Buddhism perspective, what would make him want to do that?
Right. I mean, okay, so I think he's launching this voluntary war of aggression in the name of self-adulation. He's blinded by his own propaganda. It's a thing that happens to authoritarian populists. They start to fall for their own reality distortion fields. And I mean, to some degree, it's a mistake everyone makes, but like it's galling and obscene when a world leader has these really hypocritical and vainglorious and narcissistic and toxic qualities. It's easy to
believing their
own
press, believing their own press.
Absolutely. No, I think this is a key. And I don't know, like his own faulty intelligence from like a military apparatus that says, yeah, we could knock over this Eastern European country in no time. And like,
this could also
not anticipating how much people care about their home. And it's just like, it's like an insulation from reality, makes you weak to certain kinds of, I don't know, like you think everything's mush, but then you poke into it, it's made of steel, and you might have to back off. We hope, right? But
it seems an anachronism, but you know what you see happening there. It's like this is like an old war movie, but the theme or the subject is no longer appropriate. Doesn't fit. Doesn't work. No, war doesn't work unless you figure out what he's trying to get it to do. Then maybe it works for him. But this could be taken as narcissism and self-aggrandizement as well. We're just wearing the robes. Our perspective in Zen is we don't wear these for ourselves. I don't even like wearing them. we wear them. Matsuoka Roshi insisted that we robe up when we go out with him in public. And so I learned part of it I learned from him as to why you would do that. A little bit of theatrical costuming involved there, the effect. But it just seems to me, and the other person that pops into my mind just from a wealth standpoint was the Koch brother who died with $50 billion in the bank. So what was the $50 billion all about? I mean, imagine yourself as Putin. You've got all this billions of dollars stashed away with your fellow, what are they called?
Oligarchs.
Oligarchs, who you probably don't trust. Right? Somebody said it's a Julius Caesar moment where they're going to stab him in the back the first chance they get. I'm gone.
I think we need to be careful about looking at Putin in just for today. There's a history there between the Ukraine and Russia that goes way back. And I think you could expand that to say to anybody that we're saying, you said, why the hell does anybody do it? Well, if you look at things just right now, it looks like he's a horrible, horrible man. And he is. I'm not trying to justify what he's doing, killing people, threatening with atomic weapons now. I'm not trying to but as I understand it, not a few years back, there was an elected population, an elected government in the Ukraine that was friendly to Russia, that was overthrown, and probably with the backing of the CIA. So from one perspective, he's just trying to take back what he already sort of had. Again, not trying to justify what he's doing. But I think it gets back down to money. If you trace everything back, the money and power that the money represents, and the Ukraine is, I'm told, the breadbasket of the whole thing, and they have all sorts of natural resources that the Russians would like to control. But it gets back to money. And yeah, he seems like he's a nut. No, he's got this ego and he can shake his atomic weapons. And I'm not trying to justify him at all. But there is a long history here between the Ukraine and Russia. And just to step in today and say, there's no justification of this,
Thank you for your teaching, for you and Joe, both. But let me ask you a further follow-up on that. Putin himself is supposed to be close to the richest man in the world, right? He's got billions stashed away, according to the stories. Who knows for sure? But so why does he want, what does he want this extra money for? Coming from Ukraine, what's it for? I mean,
He's deluded. He doesn't know himself. He's wrong. You know, he needs to come to Atlanta and start sitting with you so he can become awakened and get rid of all his delusions.
We have a hand raised
we have
from
a hand here.
Sami and the Zendo.
Yes.
I don't think it has to do with money at all. It's power. It's just like Trump. I don't think it worked out for Russia with Trump being in there for 4 years as the way they thought it was going to work. So he's, getting up in age and he's flexing his muscle, so to speak. And I'll use that term as, since we're in public forum. I think it's a little more lower thought process than that.
Lower on the anatomy.
Yeah. And this is, he's KGB. Don't forget that. He was raised KGB. He was the glory of Russia, even though Russia has always oppressed their people. There has never been a great, Russia's never been great. They've been the great oppressor. And, Kiev was established in 400 AD. Moscow was established in 1100. So Ukraine has been separate from Russia for a long time. And then Russia took over everything when, FDR and, Stalin divided up Europe, basically.
Okay, let me come back at you on the question of power. What good is the power that he accumulates? What does he do with it?
Well, he could continue to go on from, he could go into Poland, he could go into Romania, he could go into everything.
And then
outside.
what? Then what? What does that additional power and wealth do for Putin?
It establishes him as a dictator over the area.
But
and he can marshal all, their natural resources and stuff like that. Which got back to your question or your statement about the natural gas and, pipelines and stuff. It's everyone's fault in Europe and the United States for allowing him to be able to establish that much control over a natural resource that everyone needs. We should have seen this coming.
But if we just dismiss him as a madman and say we are not like him, he is not like us, then I think this is a little too facile, a little too easy. But if you put yourself in his shoes and say, what am I doing to, what is this additional power, conquest, and so forth going to do to help me personally in the situation I'm in? Do we even understand the situation he's in? Joe?
I think I like the track that you're on, Sensei, which is, the separation of him as a unique person on the sine wave of humanity. And certainly he's an outlier in the sense of his position and his power. But, there's a couple of things that it made me think of. My best friend is retiring this year. And so he's selling his boat and selling everything off, and they're going to, live a more simple life. And he's always described his boat to me as a hole in the water that you pour money into, meaning that you never are, the boat's never satisfied, right? So I think that power is just a hole in your soul that you pour exploitation and suffering into. And as to your question about why, I think it goes to not having a sense of who he is, which is certainly a thing that we can relate to very much. Growing up, my mother's favorite question since the time we were little, whenever we were rude or selfish or impolite or otherwise, attracted her negative attention, she would look down at us and say, who the hell do you think you are? And, I remember being little and like walking off like, wow, who the hell do I think I am? And as I mentioned to you on the phone last night, I think maybe his mother just never, and by mother, I mean the world and himself, challenged him to wonder who the hell he thinks he is. And of course, the answer is nobody, certainly nobody special, unique and separated from, the rest of humanity at this point in time and in the course of his life. But I don't think the power is going to get him anywhere. And I don't think that he necessarily might be aware that he could pour the entire world into this hole and take it all with him. And he'd be no closer to some warped definition of who he thinks he might be.
So it sounds like self, and it sounds like Joe is where Joe went, talking about the self. And I don't mean to come at this from a psychological perspective. Was he abused as a child? Was it, et cetera, et cetera. I think those are the same kind of circular explanations that don't really arrive at any kind of actual conclusion.
But we talk about the problem. You talk about the problem a lot. The problem that Buddha defined and highlighted and challenged. So why should Putin be any different in terms of that challenge? He's just trying to burn the world along with all his dukkha, and that's not going to work.
I do want to pass it to Michael in the Zendo.
Michael.
Yeah, so I was trying to think of the question what, because I was considering at first why and what the difference between what and why is. And when I think of why, I think of, well, he's trying to reabsorb, a rightful part of his land, or it offers him more social and economic control further out in Europe. Similar along the lines of why does China want Taiwan? Why does China need to reabsorb Hong Kong? It gives them more economic control. They can widen their land. But when I try to think of what is wrong with Putin?
What is wrong with Putin?
I often think of people who have a lack of notion or understanding of interbeing. And I think of how, for some people, because it's a lot of effort to work with other people. It's a lot of effort. And for some, it's easier to dominate and control and have that satisfaction rather than to work with someone and realize the mutual benefit and get that satisfaction. And there's some people that I think can't fathom the idea that they will get to give is to get, that you can have greater benefit from recognition of interbeing and mutual workmanship rather than just domination and control of the other person. And then when you
mentioned benefit, maybe come at it from there. What is the benefit to Putin of what he's doing?
Well, I think
It's not beneficial to any human being what he's doing. Is
One
it?
at a time. Rules of etiquette, one at a time.
I think there's,
Raise your hand.
when you talk about joy, I think power gives people some joy. I'm not saying that joy is right. It's ethical, but people do gain a sense of satisfaction. But the satisfaction's limited in scope. That satisfaction is tainted per se. That satisfaction
My
is
uncles were
unwhole.
in World War II in Korea, and one of them was field decorated, and he said, do anything you can to stay out of it, it's insanity. And one of the theories floating around about why ex-military, and Ungan I know is ex-military, I don't know if anybody else online is today, but is that they don't want to talk about war because they enjoyed it. The power, the sense of power and dominance over the enemies or the victims, however you want to classify them. So it brought out their lesser angels. That's one theory that I've read. Not that it was just horrible, horrible, horrible. It was actually kind of fun, you know. So is that what you mean by benefit, Michael? That's experiencing a joy that is kind of like a evil joy?
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, that's what I mean by, maybe it's not so much benefit, maybe that's the wrong word to use, but it is some sort of sensation which people can drive actions based on. And it does, you know, if you going down the path of, I think there's no realization of interdependence, then you're going down a tribalistic path. A tribalistic path results in going down the ways of that evil, that tainted joy of I need to control and dominate to get to where I want to be.
Okay, so let's go back to Joseph first, but then I wanted to ask if anybody has something different that that are not speaking up. I'm looking at Al, Carola, Janice, and Scott, and
I didn't really have
John.
much. No, please go on to other people. Yeah.
Okay, John.
This feels a little different for me. I've spent a little bit of time reflecting on Trump and the fact that I really don't know that man at all. I only know what sound bites I get, and I explore. I think a little bit about what might be projected onto Trump. And that's just a segue into Putin. I don't know this man. I have no idea really what he's like, what's going through his mind, his brain, his motivations. So I try, Sensei, to put myself a little more into his shoes in this way. I live in an area. I think we all do, but I certainly live in an area that was, I'm going to use the word conquested. It started off with a friendly group of Europeans who arrived with smiles and beads and said, let's get along on your land. The local inhabitants did not respond aggressively and violently. They tolerated that. And as you know, as the story goes, one conquest after another, until we basically devoured the United States. Oh, by the way, that was wilderness and it was undeveloped. Ha ha. And the key moment that I think of is the Trail of Tears. For me, that brings it a little closer to home.
Well, that's an interesting proposition. I just wanted to interrupt you for a second. Isn't it true that manifest destiny was part of the rationale for the Europeans coming and taking over the territory here? And in Europe, how do you feel about that concept in relation to Putin? Is he acting on some sort of manifest destiny that is bigger than him, or is this purely selfish on his part?
Oh, Joe, it's interesting that you mentioned that. And again, I only have bits and pieces, but there are sermons on record generated in Europe pre conquest and pre manifest destiny, in which the religious leaders actually indicated that God was on our side with this manifest destiny. That as we rolled across America, and again, the economists called it undeveloped land, the politicians saw it as the new frontier, but we had the backing of the church and the people in England. We had God on our side.
Well,
And,
have we proved them right?
I think it was some kind of culturally induced, and the word that comes to mind is genocide. Yes, get this, listen to the PR. We're going to give those Indians some fresh, clean, safe, secure land out in Arizona and Utah. Just happens to be desert, but they'll be happier there, right? While we take their homes, their land, cultivate them, and prosper with their resources. So, Hojo, did it work? We've been doing this since Cro-Magnon days. I don't know how to evaluate the conquest of America, other than when you ask about a different perspective, it allows me to be a little bit closer to what kinds of movements are occurring in Russia and Ukraine.
Well, what has it benefited us? What has it benefited the species in general? There are a couple of theories that I've heard that is called cultural evolution, that the reason the human species is so successful that it may kill itself off, approaching 10 billion people on the planet, is our cultural evolution. And I think the general consensus at that time was that there was no cultural evolution happening here. Although you had the Choctaws invent the canoe and the hammock, and those were passed on to future generations. So maybe it just wasn't happening at the same pace as in Europe. One of the standout things that pops out to me in history is the Chinese discovered gunpowder. Guess what they did with it? Fireworks. Now, I'm not a historian, but I think what happened is the Westerners came along and said, I think we can weaponize that. And I'm not faulting white people, the West, against the East. I'm just trying to see this from an overall perspective and try to get you to explain it to me. What is the arc of history? Does it really bend towards justice? We have one here.
Well, this kind of goes back to what we were saying about why do we invade, or what's our reasoning that God's telling us to do that. Every great genocide, every great war, every great invasion, everybody has God on their side. It's an excuse. It's nothing but an excuse, and it's not even valid anymore, in my opinion.
It's a belief.
We have another comment question from Michael.
I'd like to broach a little bit later into what does Putin believe?
This was the last comment, kind of working off the previous comment made around in terms of God on our side. I literally just read a sermon from a bishop during the Civil War that lived in the South that was giving a sermon on why the North invading was wrong and why abolishing slavery was wrong, and it was put in the context of God.
Can everybody hear, Michael?
Yes. And then one other quick thought.
Speak up a little more loudly for.
Is this a little better?
For Ungon and myself.
Gotcha. One other quick thought I just wanted to put out there is replacing Putin just for 1 second, because I don't know a lot about him, but what's wrong with Kim Jong-un? I know a little more about his history, and that he spent some time in the U.S. and there's people that are in the U.S. that remember friends with him, played basketball with him while he's at university, thought he was a fantastic person, didn't come off as, they could never imagine that he could be what he is today. So it's an interesting kind of thought to, think about, well, what's wrong with Putin? Well, let's take another leader that we might put in that same bin, and that history, what's wrong with Kim Jong-un? Well, people said he was a great kid, so what is wrong with him?
So is it another case of how you're going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris? Is it like lifestyle? Power to do what? But what good is power if you don't do anything with it? Power to do what? But tie that back to the benefit to Putin, the power to kill people, yes, but what's in his personal sphere, what does that do? Power, remember my spheres model is personal, social, and all of our comments are right now in the social sphere, bring it back to the personal. For Putin, every day he gets up, looks in the mirror, shaves, and goes to the toilet just like everybody else. What does this do for him?
I think that's the question of why, what makes a dictator? What makes someone think that they have the authority or the knowledge to be a dictator? I think it's, you know, it's the ultimate sociopathic, narcissistic human being. In
So
my
you're
opinion.
saying that the benefit is it assuages his paranoia temporarily for the moment. Something like that?
I'm sorry, say again?
It assuages his paranoia for the moment. It makes him feel safe.
It might not even be that. He might be so totally egotistical, you know. Look at it like, you know, someone in the music industry, like Kanye West, Kanye. So completely believing that their marketing, so completely believing the publicist, and then no one's talking truth to power. They live in a bubble. They do not understand the way the rest of the world sees them. Kanye's not trying to kill people yet, but you know, it's not a hard, you know, if you've been in the music industry for a minute, you can see how people believe their own marketing, their own crap.
Well, you have had a lot of killings in the music business too. They always make the news. Right? Between rappers. So maybe it would be useful to talk about, try to explain to me what Putin believes.
Joe Sensei? Is it safe to say delusion, period?
Well, I'm not sure. People say if I had been Hitler, I wouldn't have done what he did. And that's very, I think, provisional. If you stepped into Hitler's position at a certain time, you probably would not do what he did. But if you were born Adolf Hitler to his parents in Germany at that time and were raised like he was raised, it's like the science fiction quandary. Can I go back in time and change something? And if I change something and it means my grandfather isn't born, then how can I go back in time and do that? Because I couldn't have been born. So if you look at the total picture, and I think that's what some of us are pointing out, it's not simple. What's wrong with Putin?
I just have one other thing. You brought up Hitler and the quandary of like the Twilight Zone with Hitler, or that whole situation going back in time. Not necessarily going back in time, but at what point would it been okay to take Hitler out?
And they tried, right? Remember?
At what time? Right. What time? But I think that was even too late. When he went into Poland, is that when you kill him?
Right.
Is that what we do with Putin? When do we take Putin out? You know.
So talk about the Julius Caesar syndrome that somebody's going to take Putin out. I mean, somebody, Laurel. Do you imagine that he is surrounded by people who want to keep him alive and protect him no matter what? Or is he surrounded by people that just as quickly stab him in the back if they knew they could get away with it?
I think both. I think he's got, supporters that need him there because he continued, feeding money to them. Or once that stops, do they turn on him? Once you close all the accounts, make it impossible to get that money. But then you have the old school guard there that was with KGB as well, and they have this view of what Russia was and what that it should be back at that, make Russia great again.
Everybody's
Right.
expendable in that context, right?
Exactly.
I think it was Ungan and Joseph. Then Joseph, did you have your hand up? Okay, Ungan.
Yeah, trying to figure out, I sort of agree with what John said earlier, of what I think he said. Getting into the specifics of what this one individual's motivation is and is pure speculation on our part. We'll never know that for certain. But the old saying about power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's not just Putin, it's anybody in a position of power. The corporate world is full of little power-hungry people. Our religious worlds also have certain people that really enjoy exercising their powers within the sanghas. So the whole thing is people get corrupted when they get this power. And in our society, in our world, money is power to a great degree. I rest my case.
You have enough of it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to call out Elle, Carola, and Janice as from a female perspective. Some people have a theory that if women ruled the world, we wouldn't have this problem. We'd have other problems, but we wouldn't have this problem. Carola.
I think looking at Putin by himself is a mistake. You have to look at the conditions in which he arose. Russia has always been a corrupt country ruled by strong men with an oppressed peasantry. And that's why someone with Putin's basic share of ignorance, anger, and greed could get himself to the top. This is no different from what's going on all over the world. Circumstances have given rise to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump, and have also given rise to the Dalai Lama and Jose Andres and people like that.
I don't trust those guys either.
Really?
Can't take a joke?
Yeah, I can. The point I'm making is that the whole circumstance, that the human condition gives rise to these creatures, just as it gives rise to us. And we're maybe a little less able to act on our ignorance, anger, and greed, but I think most people will exercise what they can. And that's something we just have to be aware of. And this is why we sit.
It brings up another question that's really a design question, which is how, as well as Zen, is how much is enough? How much, material wealth, how much, we can figure out how much food is enough when you start vomiting and have to go to the vomitorium and come back and eat more. But how much is enough? What are they after?
Well, these are rational decisions, and ignorance, anger, and greed override rationality a lot of the time.
Right. Let me quote something. I'm not going to quote it well. George Risley, who's a scholar, North Georgia, contributed to the Razor Blade of Zen, the book that the publishers now. And I was making that same point, that these are irrational decisions. And he made the point, and I included it in the book, that not necessarily. It's only irrational if a person does not believe in what they believe and then act on it anyway. If they're acting on a belief that they truly believe, that they are the chosen of God or whatever it is, that their decisions are rational because they actually believe that. So it looks to me like to get to what we would call rationality in Buddhism, Dogen described it as developing true intelligence, what we do through our meditation. They would have to come to disbelief in what they believe and what has structured their whole world. And that was Nagarjuna's approach in debate, in public debate, was to completely demolish and undermine, take away the assertions and the underlying premises of the so-called enemy in the debate. It was actually to help them. So we have to be careful of, George taught me, we have to be careful about how we use irrational, because it's only irrational if the person does not believe in the premises upon which they are acting.
Well, perhaps ignorant and unintelligent are better choices than irrational.
You got it right from Zamai here on that one. So Janice and Elle, one of you, how do you feel about what Carola said, or the tone of the conversation in general? Janice.
Hi. It's interesting what you're saying about Putin, and yes, he's under delusion, but I believe that he genuinely stands behind his motivation and his belief that he should, quote unquote, regain what's rightfully his. And there's a lot of passion behind that. And sometimes I feel that passion is what really ends up rising. Just the passion alone.
It really ends up doing what?
Rising, prevailing.
Rising, prevailing, okay. So let me ask you, do you feel Putin really has a choice? In other words, if he did what we all think he should have done, if he called it off, retreated, what would he be facing then?
Himself.
Well, how about the folks back home? That's what I'm getting at. Is he really between a rock and a hard place? Like this idea that I wouldn't do what Hitler did presumes that Hitler had a choice.
I haven't quite figured out if he really cares about that.
He was apparently willing to take a huge gamble risk to do what he did, knowing it was not only going to be unpopular everywhere in the world, but also back home.
Yes, and the propaganda that he spews, that he's so still desperately trying to keep under control in the media there, it's really, there's no way he can have success in doing so, because so many Russians have friends and family in Ukraine, and they're getting information otherwise. So it's hard to believe that he truly is under some illusion that he can convince people that he's a different person or has a different motive. I just don't know that he cares. I think it's a step in advancing what he wants to do.
Well, we have this expression, damned if you do, damned if you don't. He was certainly knew he was damned if he did what he was going to do. But how do you feel about if he didn't do it, was he also damned in some way?
I think so, in his mind.
$7:45. Elle, how about you? Are you there, Elle? You just come off mute and you can speak. Is that a no, Al? You don't have to talk. I won't call you out. Okay, Scott, I think you're the last person who hasn't said anything, other than Justin here in the room.
Ah, there we go.
Okay. Oh, there's Al. Okay. Let's go L first and then Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good. I just want to say, I don't think that Putin knows when to stop. I think people have to actually tell him to. I know from being an artist that I keep going in my art until professors would take the paintbrush out of my hand and say, okay, stop. So maybe Putin just needs someone to say, okay, stop. And I think that's what's going on right now with Ukraine. I think people there are saying, okay, enough, stop. And he doesn't know how to stop.
So it's compulsive obsessive behavior.
Yes, I think so. And I'm not sure what his idea of perfection is. Maybe it's to rule all of Europe. Who knows?
Elle, for those of you who don't know Elle, she's also a painter. And I had this experience of painting when I was doing my graduate work, and I finally graduated my undergraduate in an apartment in Chicago. One of the rooms I used, should have been the dining room, but I used it as my art studio. I had 2 canvases on 2 easels. I was painting with oil paint. And at the end of the year, I still had 2 canvases. But each of those canvases had probably 100 paintings on it. So I literally did not know when to stop. And what I had to learn to do was set it aside and put a blank canvas up, and then continue the same painting. But I would end up with a body of work that way. The other way, you don't. So maybe El's got a point that he's just keeping on, and he can't stop. Another kind of neurosis. Scott, what do you think? Chime in.
I appreciate all the comments. I'll share with the group a little bit here on a personal level. As a recovering narcissist, a lot of what everyone here is referring to plays into my own personal life. When Hojo, you ask how much is enough for Putin, there's not enough. For a narcissist, there is not enough. For the collective consciousness that has narcissistic beliefs, there is not enough. He fails to see through the egoic cloud beyond a dualistic mindset. He does not see that as a narcissist, nor do the people around him that support him see that. It's impossible for a narcissist to see that until there's a trauma in their consciousness that wakes them to a non-dualistic mindset.
Could it be also a trauma in the environment, like tanks coming down the street could also wake up a narcissist?
Possibly, but he's still feeding on that narcissistic need to complete himself and his vision, whatever that might be. You know, we refer to Hitler or whoever, they had the same narcissistic vision, and that flowed over to the community, to the collective conscious. And once that ball's in motion, he can't back up from it. He cannot stop. I'll bring it back to on a personal level. As a narcissist, I did a lot of running. I start with 5Ks. I go to half marathons. Half marathons not enough, because that's the only way I could feed my narcissistic need. I went from there to a marathon, and I ran multiple marathons, and then I had to go to ultra marathon. Once I started that ultra marathon, someone tell me to stop, not going to happen. So kind of, I'm just kind of sharing personally my thoughts on it and how I can relate to what's going on there at a world level. So I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's kind of my thoughts as I hear everyone speak.
It sounds very much like another version of what I said. So what is wrong with Putin is what is wrong with all of us.
Very much so, at some level or another.
I do want to give Justin and Michael a chance to talk. I believe both of them have.
And we'd like a comment from you too.
Michael, you're good? Okay. I'll give it to Michael and try to think of a comment to make.
This is Renzai. You have to respond. You have no choice. What? Yeah. Dictator's end.
I think the question of does he have a choice is really interesting. That was brought up a little bit ago, because, and I'll get to kind of the point at the very end if it seems like we're on a tangent for a second. But when I think back, the arc of human history, I don't feel like it's been towards justice. I feel like it's been towards survival, and justice is something we have to work towards as a group of people. And part of survival is this foundational quality that brings us happiness, that is security. And, when I think of that, when I think of security, does, for Putin to gain security, does he have a choice? Well, if he backs off, we're not going to stop hounding him about other ethical issues. We're going to demand him back off even more from where he was before. So if you go into that cycle of what gets him security, well, he's supposedly already doing other ethically questionable things. So you have to double down. You either have to go back the other way or go forward. And Putin doesn't want to go back. So the only way he can go is forward, which is invading Ukraine, invading other places. If you build that kind of lifestyle, the only security you can gain is if you, per se, go for world domination. Then no one can tell you to go back.
So every day, Michael, you get up and get out of bed. Do you have a choice?
I would say I have a choice, but I think the belief of what Putin has renders him to think he doesn't have a choice. So that when he's deciding what he needs to do, the belief also factors in to make him, I guess, going back to delusion, that to him it seems like there is no choice.
Somebody mentioned the Dalai Lama. He was on stage. I was invited to his, what do they call it, where they installed him over here at Emory. And he was reduced to pleading with this audience of 4,000 people to stop worshiping him. He was saying, I'm just a monk. I'm just an ordinary monk. So he knew he was dealing with something like celebrity worship. And it occurred to me that the Dalai Lama is like that. He doesn't have a choice. Every day he gets up and puts on his pants. I don't know what they put on really under the robes, but just like everybody else, but he doesn't have a choice. He has to be the Dalai Lama. I guess he could resign or something, right? But once you're in that position, you don't have a choice. And that's the societal realm. That's not the personal realm. He's not the Dalai Lama to himself.
And then you think of if other people have a choice around him too, and how that factors in. And, I think of, not to bring up China again, but I think of, I've read an article where it's, if you support the Communist Party as a young person, you have a really good life. They support you. You succeed in that society. And yes, you do have a choice whether or not to live in China and support that. But also, how much can I blame someone for wanting to be happy, have a good life, and succeed? How much am I going to demonize someone for choosing that over possibly being prosecuted?
The new word is privilege. We have white privilege, male privilege, etc. And the people who can afford to get out of Ukraine in some decent fashion, are privileged to be able to do so. Others don't have that choice. They don't have that privilege. But I can't imagine any body in the world who would be any more privileged than Putin. And yet it looks to me like he's locked in. no wiggle room. I'm not sure. I don't like to ascribe things to evil because I think the Buddhist worldview is very bullish, optimistic on what human beings can accomplish or can be. But once you're evil, right? There's no exit hatch out of that. So I'm calling Suki out here.
I had a full 5 minutes to think. But no. I think what has been coming back to me throughout this entire talk is the original question of what the hell is wrong with Putin, and your emphasis on particular words of that sentence, particularly what, which you've explained the difference between what, why, and how in a various model, and then coming back to Putin and what that substitutes. And to me, the what that is the hell wrong with Putin, maybe I'm projecting, but I think listening to Scott, I resonate, and I think many other people resonate with the what of whatever the hell is wrong with Putin. I've felt that what, I've been narcissistic, or whatever you want to project onto the what, but whatever that what is, I've been there, I've experienced it. I just didn't come from a Russian oligarchy and have buttons to weapons of mass destruction. If I was born however many lateral coordinates wherever else, it would just be the same thing manifesting as a different shade of the rainbow, or some different manifestation of the light after it hits the prism.
So is it redeemable? I mean, I feel like I probably would throw the switch or pull the trigger given the opportunity. But from a Buddhist perspective, everyone is redeemable, if not in this lifetime, in the future life.
You're asking me if it's redeemable, what Putin's doing?
Is Putin redeemable?
I think to say redeemable puts like a projection onto the future, and I think to qualify if Putin's redeemable or not has to make an assertion of his entire past and where he comes from and where he came from before he was born. Was he redeemed before he was born? Was he redeemed before? And then going kind of like to Laurel's allusion to the Twilight Zone, like at what point do you kill Hitler? What's the best time? When is the best time to redeem Putin? Because that was probably, there's always that opportunity, I feel like.
I see Corolla's got her hand up, but I wanted to say, I think from a Western Judaic and Christian moralistic perspective, things are seen differently. Once you're condemned to hell, it's forever. Buddhism is not like that, and that's one of the most difficult pieces to embrace, I think, is the possibility of Hitler being redeemable, Putin, and so forth. So, Corolla, agent.
Remember, the Emperor Ashoka gave up his warlike ways after he converted to Buddhism. So, redemption is a value judgment to me. Could he be persuaded to give up these behaviors is the more important question. And historically, there have been emperors who have called off wars. These things have happened, but they're not very likely. So the question for me is not what's wrong with Putin, it's what can we do to look at our own lives? What can we do to change the circumstances that gave rise to Putin?
Good.
And he gave rise in an era of tension between us and Russia. When, as has been pointed out, he was KGB. Those are the most paranoid people on earth. Right. And so he's a slave to the circumstances that gave rise to him. Can he suddenly, be hit by lightning metaphorically it's always possible. Is it likely? Not really. But the question is really, who cares why he's doing this? The question is, what do we do in response?
Yeah, there was a Jataka tale where Buddha was said to have killed the swordsman who was killing other people to stop him and to stop his karma in its tracks too. I think the last question I would ask is you to respond to or consider. Well, how much time we have? We're out of time.
We are at noon.
Okay, well, it's Putin feels justified, right? He feels justified. And so we speak of justice, you know. We don't use karma to rationalize not dealing with injustice when we come across it. And Buddha was conferred with by a couple of tribes. One was planning to wage war on the other tribe. And he didn't say, no, war is always unjust. He said, if both sides will be better off after the war, then it can be considered a just war. And the question, of course, that arises, how could you know? How could you know? Now, we consider World War II a just war, where the Allies defeated the Axis powers. But when you look into the history of it, you see there was an awful lot of shenanigans going on all behind the scenes everywhere. And as Ungan was saying, it was driven by power, money, and so forth. So it wasn't entirely just. We would have to ask the question in this case, are both sides going to be better off, both Ukraine and Russia and the rest of the world? There's like 3 sides at least to this one. Can there be a just war anymore ever in the future? Does war work? Good. Justin's got one.
Test. I think it was kind of funny, the question, does war work? I thought back to looking at the Olympic Games, and a lot of the sports seem to come from like the what is that, the sport that they do cross country and then they shoot at targets.
Yep.
A lot of them seem to have more, I guess, intense origins, where there's actual killing involved, you know, of an animal. And maybe some sports that got canceled out, but a lot of them started from an origin like that, and then it turns into competition.
Right.
A lot of like basketball games, people used to get killed if you lost, stuff like that. So I mean, is there war anymore? Maybe war turns into something like that, where it's played for a lot of money or something like that. I don't know, but it just, the fact that Ukraine was invaded while the Olympics happened kind of sparked something in my mind that I wanted to share and see what you guys thought about.
It would be an interesting proposition. You want this land, the Sudeten land, or you want Ukraine? Let's have a scrum, you know, and see whoever wins, you know, surrenders to scrum, you know, soccer, whatever. Right, surrenders to the other side.
Well,
that would be preferable to war, I think.
I think you have higher hopes of the human nature than reality, because, you know, that would be, yeah, if we could do that and everybody would agree to after that game is done.
But
okay.
you have to ask the question, why don't the warriors go out in a field like they used to do with their swords and shields and knives and fight each other and see who wins? Well, why do they have to come into the village and make that the site of the war? Because guerrilla warfare was invented, for one thing, right?
Well, yeah, because that old way of doing warfare was, you know, you only won if you had more people than the other.
Yep, normal.
But talking about a just war, yeah, I mean, I think defending democracy, which Ukraine is a democracy, is absolutely worth defending, because if you let a bully take over, if you stand up to a bully, 9 times out of 10, that bully will step down. will quit.
That gives us a
If you
good,
don't, then they're just
Yep.
going to keep going.
Yep.
So I think a just war, this would be a just war for NATO to get their act together and stand up to Putin and not allow him to take Ukraine. Because when one democracy falls, the next one will fall too if we don't stand up.
well, maybe that's a good place to end, and something we can take up next time. We can talk a little bit about Zen and democracy. Have a good one, everybody. Let's finish with the Four Noble Truths. We do these 3 times. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. So it would be interesting to compare those 4 vows to the war in Ukraine. Have a good one, everyone. Take good care of yourself.